Now to Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman. I think your question is very insightful and informative, so thank you. I have a question for each of the three. I want to start with Dr. Mikulska. You know, many European countries have dramatically reduced their reliance on Russian natural gas. You can see where Russian natural gas supplies were up there in 2017 in terms of Europe's need. The two charts are showing it. The Russian natural gas is being replaced by liquefied natural gas, and where we are today, 2022 LNG is the top. It used to be at the bottom, now it's up at the top, and you mentioned, all of you have mentioned that. So before the war, Russia was the lead source of Europe's gas, with LNG imports from all countries limited. The second chart, 2022 LNG imports moved to the top of the list, replacing Russian gas. So my question to you is, as more of our allies in Europe and around the world look to wean themselves off of Russian gas, how important is it here in the United States that we increase U.S. LNG export capacity?
It's very important, and that's because of the type of capacity that U.S. releases. Commercially oriented, not driven by politics or policy. So while we can talk about the different ways in which markets may not be unpredictable, they still react to the demand and supply equation. And that's why Europe was able to attract so much LNG, because the prices were there and they were supporting the movement of US LNG and other LNG into Europe. I think it's interesting to see that part of that LNG that Europe receives is from Russia, though. So that's something also that needs to be considered going forward. And it's probably better to have the U.S. commercially oriented LNG in Europe.
Well, then let me just turn then to Dr. Light regarding that answer and what you've just seen here on these charts. So we've heard how important increasing U.S. LNG export capacity is for European energy security. Now, I'm aware of at least one project that right now is awaiting Department of Energy approval to build a floating LNG terminal off the coast of Mexico, which would use U.S. natural gas. Would exporting this U.S. LNG from such a facility help boost global energy security?
It would, Senator Barrasso. If you're referring to the two Sempra projects, both of them have been permitted, though, as of December.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to continue to make sure that permitting goes through. And,
built now, right?
well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of issues and different permits
Absolutely,
for different components of it. So.
Absolutely, sir. And anything that you'd like to flag for our attention, we, of course, welcome it.
Great. Thanks, Mr. And now for our Director Jorgensen. So last month, the Washington Post published a front-page story. I have it right here. Power Titan quietly aids Russian war effort. And the first line of the article reads, Russia's state nuclear power conglomerate is working to supply the Russian arms industry with components, technology, and raw materials for missile fuel, aiding Russia's deadly onslaught on Ukraine. Washington Post front page story. The article provides proof, and it's a long, involved article, that Russia's state-owned nuclear energy company, Rosatom, uses revenue from its nuclear sales, including uranium, to fund Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine. The article suggests that the European Union may soon implement sanctions against Rosatom. Can you update us on the status of the European efforts to cut off Russian uranium?
Yes, thank you, Ranking Member. Indeed, first of all, the role of Russia and Rosatom in the global nuclear market, the fuels market, is indeed of concern. Within the European Union, we have 5 member states that are specifically dependent on Rosatom for the technical support for the fuel type, and that's for historic reasons that these countries have Russian-built nuclear facilities in their countries. So one priority for us is to reduce that dependence, to get out of that dependence and help those countries and those nuclear facilities step out of the dependence on Russian supplies. That's part of our Repower EU plan, and we'll continue working on that and working with international partners, because some of the alternative fuel supplies could come from American companies or European companies. So we're working on that. As Chairman Senator Manchin mentioned, there is also concern about the high dependency on uranium, and that's a global concern that we need to work together to address. As regards sanctions, our approach is the following. We seek to apply the sanctions that are most effective vis-à-vis Russia, that has the most significant impact on Russia, while, of course, harming ourselves as little as possible. And in the field of the nuclear sector, we see that the impact would, at this point in time, probably be limited, and it could cause a number of challenges for ourselves. We presented a 10th sanctions package yesterday. It does not cover these aspects, but of course, we will see what happens, and we'll continue developing our response.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask Dr. Light on following up with what we just heard there. So in 2021, Russia was our third largest supplier of uranium to the United States, about 14% of our demand. Seems every dollar we give to Russia supports Putin's war against Ukraine. Our nuclear industry is ready to transition away from Russian uranium. My home state of Wyoming, vast uranium resources. It does seem that our nuclear fuel suppliers need assurance that Russia is not going to be able to continue to flood our market with cheap uranium. Do you agree we need to ban Russian uranium to provide American nuclear fuel suppliers with some market certainty?
Yes, Senator, I completely agree. We have got to explore all tools to limit Putin's ability to continue funding his invasion of Ukraine, certainly including nuclear. I think any uranium ban must be accompanied by, obviously, strategic investments in our own supply chain, so we completely support your efforts, all the efforts here, to try to include that in previous legislation, but also in proposed legislation. We look forward to discussing that with you. We definitely believe that our current nuclear reactors need to wean themselves off of the Russian supply, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.